MSNBC, as we've been talking about pressure mounting on the NRA this weekend as corporations continue to cut ties with the organization in the face of widespread boycotts. The power behind the boycott movement, a new wave of student activists, including some who survived last week's school shooting in Florida. Their anger is rattling big business, state capitals, and even Washington. Joining me now is Stoneman Douglas Senior David Hogg. It's a great pleasure to speak with you here in New York. You've been calling for this, using Twitter to call for it.
Yeah. Well, first I want to respond to what Rachel just said.
Please, Rachel Bavard, who was just on a moment ago. Yeah.
I'm so sorry that you've lost faith in America, because I haven't. I know that a lot of people out there believe that these implementations won't work, but we have to try something. I'm sorry that you don't, but we have to try.
Let me get to something that the president just tweeted a moment ago. We can return to the corporation in just a sec, but she was talking about arming teachers, talking about some of the things that she'd like to see tried, mental health among them. But let me read the president's most recent tweet here. Armed educators and trusted people who work within a school love our students and will protect them. Very smart people, must be firearms adept and have annual training, should get yearly bonus. Shootings will not happen again. A big and very inexpensive deterrent up to states. I want you to react to that. I confess that as I heard the president talk about this, my mind wandered to who taught me in high school. The president narrowed his approach and said, think about gun adept people. I have trouble defining who that might be. He clarified it further to say vets. That's a very small population of people who taught me in my high school. What do you make of what the president's tweeted to this proposal that he's floated over these last few days?
I mean, honestly, think about it this way. There were several armed police officers that were around my school and they didn't take action. We don't even pay our teachers a living wage in South Florida, to be quite frank with you. They have to pay for most of their supplies. I don't think the solution to this problem is more guns. That's what the NRA wants. That's what these politicians want that are backed by the NRA, is to increase the sales for these gun manufacturers. And that's what they're really trying to work on right here. I don't think that we should be giving our teachers guns if we can't even pay them a living wage. And especially if trained police officers didn't step in to take action to stop this horrifying individual, why would a teacher? And not even to mention that, imagine a scenario where a student is able to get a gun from a teacher after that teacher's been taken out by a school shooter, and that student's trying to protect her himself. What happens when they get misidentified by a police officer and get killed? Now, the GOP's response to that is going to be more student IDs. That's not the case. You have a split-second decision to decide whether or not it's you or them. In that split second, you don't have time to look at an ID. You have time to pull a trigger.
I don't know if this is the time for counterfactuals. My understanding is you were in Ashley Kerr's classroom. She's the culinary arts teacher at your high school. She, from all I've read, did everything she could to shepherd into that classroom as many students as she could have. How, as you think of that, would things have been different had she had a gun, or one of her colleagues on the faculty had a gun, in terms of what she was able to do to you and 59, 60 of your peers?
Well, think about it this way. No matter where you come out of, you're leaving those students behind, even if you do have a gun. So if you're going after a school shooter, they're going to come after wherever you're coming from and take out all of the soft targets that are in that classroom, like the 65 others that were in mine. In the hypothetical scenario that Ashley Kerr, the teacher that protected me so bravely, along with 65 others, did have a gun, and she started going after the shooter and ended up dying, that shooter would go straight to us and mow us all down. And not to mention the fact that, what if there were multiple shooters? What if there was a fire alarm? Can you imagine the mass chaos and hysteria that would be caused? Imagine all the police officers trying to figure out which gunshots are friendly, which ones are not. They don't have time for that. They need to make decisions, and we don't need any more guns in these scenarios.
You've had a front row seat here as these policy debates have started to coalesce. The president talking about mental health, talking about what law enforcement should do.
And that's good, and I applaud him for that. I really do. Any step at this point is a step in the right direction, but to be quite frank with you, I don't think, in my own opinion, that it's teachers that should be taking the lives of students into their own hands. It should be policymakers that are making sure that these crazy individuals, that these mentally unstable individuals can't get an AR-15.
He's talked about the sheriff's deputy who was a school resource officer at your school. I wonder if you knew of him or interacted with him, and what you make of all this in light of what the president and others have said about what he did or didn't do on the day of that shooting.
Well, I've tried interviewing him before. He would never go on camera with our school news, but I have interviewed him before. He's a very conservative man, but he just like every other police officer out there, at heart is a good person. He didn't take action in this event, and I can't explain why, or I just can't explain. There are no words to explain why he wouldn't take action to take out this individual. But I think it's a good example of how if he didn't take action and supposedly 4 others didn't, I mean, who does? Who wants to go down the barrel of an AR-15 even with a Glock? And I know that's what these police officers are supposed to do. but they're people too. They need to worry about themselves as well as all the other students, and I don't think teachers need to have that responsibility either.
I want to spend a minute here just asking what these last 10 days have been like for you. You've been foisted into, I would also say elected to be part of this national conversation about this. How much is your inclination to focus on the local level or the state level? How comfortable are you playing this role at the national level?
We have to play at the national level. As Rachel was saying earlier, it's going to be a long, hard fight in the Supreme Court, possibly. But luckily, we have the backing of the American public and their beliefs and some of their funding, too. So we can fight it. We just have to start the lower circuit courts and eventually make our way up. We can submit an amicus curiae brief, which is a Friends of the Court brief, to submit our arguments verbally to the Supreme Court to explain to them why we believe this is the case. And I think that would send a really powerful message. And it's one that we can get done because we are going to outlive these old men that are in Congress right now, and we're going to make change for our future, not theirs.
I'm one of the 300,000 plus who now follow you on Twitter. You have this platform. You've been endowed with it here over just the last few days. And let's go back to that corporate issue. You've been talking about a number of these companies in particular who have had relationships with the NRA. And you look at who has severed ties with the NRA. Delta, United, Hertz, Avis and Budget, MetLife, Symantec, SimpliSafe, other companies following suit. What do you make of that reaction? How much interface have you had with them directly? You've been talking about it on Twitter, but have you talked to representatives from those companies?
No, not at all, because I haven't had to. Because everybody that's on Twitter that follows me, not everyone, but a majority of them, are politically active individuals now that want to take action and ensure that this country is safe and democracy is not bought by these disgusting individuals at the very top of the NRA. And I want to make one thing very clear. I support the fact that there are people that are joining the NRA at the base level where they're trying to get more gun safety, they're trying to make their voices heard politically. That's a good thing. What I'm against here, and what I think a lot of the people that are members of the NRA should realize, is the people that are at the top aren't listening to them. They're listening to the gun manufacturers that are paying the people at the top of their organization off to lobby Washington so that we can create this positive feedback loop where we sell more guns because we scare more people, and as more people get scared, we buy more guns.
You benefit from having the social media presence. There have been negatives to it as well. You've addressed some of those. I want to ask you about the responsibility of companies who run those platforms to police them. Your name, your reputation, your background has been run through the mud in cyberspace over these last many days. How much of the fault do you lay at these companies for not policing those networks better than they have?
Honestly, none. A lot of it is just these individuals that get on there and want to make their voices heard. And honestly, no matter what their voice is, even if they say terrible things about me, they're still trying to make their voice heard, and I have to understand and respect that if I ever want to be able to be heard by them. In fact, they've been great advertising. I've more than quadrupled my Twitter following ever since they've started trolling me. The media has been able to cover this even more. They've done a great job of that.
You go back to school this week. Students are expected to go back to the high school this week.
Yeah.
Over the last 10 days, you haven't been in school. You've been headlong in this policy debate. What have your conversations been like with peers, those who are embracing this activism as you have, and others, just about the prospects of doing that? My sense is teachers return on Monday. The students are expected to on Tuesday. What are you thinking about the return to that place?
For one, my AP Gov class taught by Jeffrey Foster, an amazing man that has taught me essentially everything that I know about this and why I'm able to speak about this so clearly and, as people say, eloquently today. In fact, if there were any cards that I did memorize as an actor, it would be his PowerPoints from his class. Learning about the Supreme Court, learning about circuit courts, learning about the bicameral legislature and why we have a House of Representatives that was created by the framers in the 18th century to make it so that we can have this major revolution where if there is corruption in politics like there is now, we can have a peaceful transition of power and restore American democracy to what it should be.
After the shooting at Sandy Hook, I got an assignment from where I was working last. That was to cover the business of guns. And I was surprised by how big it was, how intertwined it was, how difficult it was to figure out. I bring that up because I'm curious. I want to get your reaction to being exposed to this, I imagine for the first time or in a way that you weren't before. What you make of how big, how vast that apparatus is. What surprised you about the way the gun lobby, the way these organizations work or exist in U.S. society?
Oh, nothing. There's multiple others. Like, if you look at basically any major corporation in America, they have a huge lobby. In fact, the NRA, I don't even think is the biggest lobby in America financially. I believe, like, the National Association of Realtors has a bigger financial backing than even the NRA. What the NRA has, though, is people that get out and go to they tell people where to go, when to be at certain legislative hearings and to make their voices heard. And that's obviously a good thing in terms of democracy so that more people can make their voices heard for what they believe in. But we also need to have people that are out there ensuring that we can have limitations on the Second Amendment in the same sense that we have limitations on the First. Let me get something straight here. The First Amendment, you can say whatever you want, but you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. You shouldn't be able to get an AR-15 if you're mentally ill. I don't understand what is so hard for these politicians to agree on.
Look ahead for me, if you would. There's this march that's going to take place in mid-March. What happens after that? There's a lot of talk of how you sustain this momentum or grow this momentum. Obviously, the march is one component part of that.
Oh,
how do you do it going forward as you look ahead to graduation at the end of May?
Hopefully. Multiple marches, making sure that people get out there. People are working during midterms because, and don't get this wrong here, this is not a Republican or Democrat thing. There are some Democrats that do take money from the NRA, as well as multiple other terrifying interest groups on Wall Street and various places like that. But with the NRA, what the NRA does is they heavily lobby the GOP mostly. And that's what we're really trying to get after here, is making sure we're going by candidate basis. We're not going by party. We're making sure that whatever individual that we're helping out with to explain, they are not here to murder your children. They're here to actually support them and grow our future as American citizens.
How much interest do you have going forward in talking to politicians in particular? It seems like it's been more productive to talk to people about this, regular people, than politicians.
Absolutely.
How much of your strategy involves talking to politicians?
A ton of it's involved talking to politicians, but none of them have been listening. In fact, only one Republican was able to talk to us in Tallahassee, and we had multiple meetings set up, and many of them just didn't show up. And that is what's happening in our democracy. Our elected officials just aren't listening to us. What's happening in Florida right now is this session for the legislative process is about to be over. They want people to forget that this has ever happened. They want people to forget that each of those individuals that voted no on that bill to even talk about just assault weapons on the floor of the Florida State Senate or House. They want people to forget, and we're not going to let that happen, because people are waking up and they're realizing America is not right, and we need to fix it.
David, thank you very much. Appreciate it.